So thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to present this live and not online, recorded. So I'm going to tell you about a study, well, I think with a happy end, and it's about newborn screening, sex-linked newborn screening in the Netherlands. So these are my disclosures, and this study was funded by the Dutch government. First, one little introduction about ALD. It's a disease that's caused by mutations in the ABCD1 gene that leads to a buildup of very long chain fatty acids. This you can already detect at birth, so that's one of the reasons that we can do newborn screening for ALD. A complicating factor for ALD is that we cannot predict the clinical outcome of individuals. So males are at risk of developing adrenal insufficiency, and it can already start in the first year of life. Males are also at risk of developing cerebral ALD, which we heard a lot about yesterday. And that can start from about the age of 3, but it can also be much later, as shown on the next slide. And in adulthood, males and females develop slowly progressive spinal cord disease, for which there's no therapy. And why is newborn screening important? And that's shown on this slide. So this is the age of, in this case, male patients, and then the percentage of these different variants of the disease. And if we now zoom in to the first 10 years of life, so just at this part, then we see that 1 out of 2 boys will develop adrenal disease before the age of 10 years. And 1 out of 3 boys, and that's, of course, that's treatable with hormone replacement therapy. But it's often missed, the diagnosis, and there can be delayed in diagnosis. And 1 out of 3 boys will develop brain disease, and it can be treated with a bone marrow transplant, but only in the pre-symptomatic phase. So when the boy already has neurological symptoms, it's often already too late for treatment. So already in 2004, Hugo Moser at a US newborn screening meeting said, well, ALD newborn screening saves life. And well, everybody agreed. But they said, well, there's one problem. You cannot diagnose the disease at birth, because at that time, there was no way to identify the disease in the heel prick blood. So he was given a task to identify a biomarker that you could measure in heel prick blood. And in 2007, a team of researchers in Baltimore identified C26 lysophosphatidylcholine, or C26 lyso-PC, which is a lipid, a complex lipid, but it has a fatty acid attached to it, the C26. And that you can measure in heel prick blood from babies, and it's already elevated at birth. And for this biomarker, you can set up high throughput screening using mass spec techniques. So you can run hundreds of samples a day. But then, yeah, that was still not enough to get ALD in newborn screening, because it takes different steps. And in 2013, Elise Seeger, she lost her son Aiden to ALD because he was diagnosed too late. And then she found out that actually it was possible to do newborn screening, but nobody wasn't doing it. And she made it, well, her mission. And in 2013, New York State was the first state to start newborn screening. And if we now look at the map of the US, currently, at this moment, 36 states in the US are screening for ALD, with Alabama starting last month in March. And it's expected that, well, in not too long future, the whole US will be screening, but we're not living in the US. So outside the US, it's a different story, because, well, a little below the radar, Taiwan started screening in 2016, and we only found out that last year, when I was reviewing their manuscript, and they only had published one small abstract somewhere at an obscure meeting. So it was for most people, it was unknown. And then in 2021, 2 pilots started in Japan and in Italy, but that's about it. And now we go back to 2013. In 2013, in the Netherlands, the Health Council had plans to expand newborn screening. The newborn screening program was really successful, and it was time to expand it. And they had a roundtable meeting where they discussed diseases that would fill the criteria for newborn screening. And they used the list in America, the RUSP list, the Recommended Uniform Screening Panel list, and on that list ALD was not there. So, but we knew of the plans going on in the United States. So my colleague Mark Engelen and I, we took the chance and we nominated ALD. And then 2014 came, nothing happened, but we heard there were good things going on. And then 2015, the Health Council recommended the Ministry of Health to expand the newborn screening program in the Netherlands with 14 additional diseases, and one of them would be ALD. So that was all very good, but it took a while because if you look at the criteria for newborn screening, this is already from the 1968, the World Health Organization, the Wilson and Younger criteria. One of the most important items on that list, criteria, is that early diagnosis must be directly beneficial to the neonate. So the baby must have profit coming out of newborn screening. So there must be a treatment. And ALD is a problem. So there was a lot of discussion we heard later because of the women. And also the late onset for actually the majority of patients. Because I told you that 1 out of 2 boys develop, or 1 out of 3 develop cerebral ALD, but 2 out of 3 do not. So this is from the Dutch Health Council report, and it says that screening for ALD is only useful in male newborns because the symptoms in women arise later and cannot be treated. There's no treatment for the spinal cord disease. And therefore the committee recommends the only screen newborns for ALD in the newborn screening program. And that's interesting because in the US boys and girls are screened, and also in Taiwan boys and girls are screened, and then in the Netherlands we would only screen boys. And I have one slide on why is this difference? Because this is a delicate balance between ethical considerations and perspectives. So on one side we have the Wilson and Younger criteria, and on the other hand, the other side we have the ALD perspective. And there's no right or wrong here, so that's why my balance is in the middle. And now, almost 10 years later, I still have I'm still in the middle. And people got angry at me, but I wasn't there. It was not my decision. And I think there are pros and cons for everybody, for both decisions. So if you follow the Wilson and Younger criteria, it says, well, there's no therapy for the spinal cord disease. So it doesn't fulfill the criteria. And on top of that, if you identify a girl with ALD, you basically create a patient in waiting because of the late onset disease. So the girl will know she has a genetic disease, and ultimately she will become ill. This likely has a negative impact on the quality of life. It may have consequences for life insurance, mortgage. And another one is that in newborn screening, everybody's screened, and you can say, well, I want to get my baby screened or not, but you cannot say, well, I want to have my baby screened for this disease, not for this disease. So parents are not asked if they want their daughter being screened for late onset disease. And that is, if you follow the Wilson and Younger criteria, that's true. But if you look from the ALD perspective, there's a good reason to do newborn screening for girls, because often if you identify a girl with ALD, you can do extended family screening. And there are so many examples of large family screening where boys are identified that were not diagnosed with ALD. And now suddenly they enter follow-up programs. And parents can make informed decision with the other children if they want more children. And also the girl can make informed decisions because she already knows that she has the disease. But like I said, there's no right and wrong here, but we were faced with a problem because we had the task to develop a sex-specific newborn screening program, and there was no example worldwide. So this required a pilot study because we really had to develop and set up a method to do this. So this is the newborn screening, the Netherlands from a newborn screening perspective. The 12 provinces and the islands in the Caribbean are divided in 5 newborn screening regions. And all these regions have a newborn screening lab. And in the pilot study, 2 of these regions participated. And the pilot would last for 1 year, and in these 4 provinces, on average, 70,000 babies would be born in a year. And the task and the challenge that we were giving is that we had to design and develop and validate a screening algorithm that would identify males, but only using blood spots. To give you an idea about this, this is, well, you recognize these ones. This is a blood spot that we could use. So it's 3.2 millimeters. And in this blood spot, we had to identify boys, and they had to be boys with ALD. And on top of that, we were asked not to identify unwanted or untreatable diseases. And if you think of an X-linked disease, you can think of Klinefelter syndrome, an untreatable condition, Turner syndrome, but also other diseases that are associated with elevated C26 lyso-Pc or elevated variant chain fatty acids. Zellweger and many of the enzymes, and also, as James said, Agadi-Gutierrez syndrome is on the list. And now we also know that neonatal lupus can also be, there are also cases of neonatal lupus that are identified by C26 lyso-Pc. And we're not allowed to identify those either. So we thought about it a lot. So how can we pick up boys just using blood? And actually, it's not that difficult, because males only have 1 X chromosome and females have 2 X chromosomes. So if you look at the ratio of, for example, chromosome 3 to the X chromosome, there are 2 chromosomes 3, and there's only 1 X chromosome in a male. The ratio is 2 to 1, and in women, the ratio is 1 to 1. And you can do tests to visualize that. And you see that here. So here you have two peaks from chromosome 3, and the X chromosome is 1 to 1. In the male is 2 to 1. Of course, if you do one test and it fails, then you have a problem. So we expanded this, and we have 3 of these. And so you see a very clear difference. So we use this trick to identify blood spots from boys. And this is the way the screening algorithm that was developed by New York State, and it's used by many other states and the countries that do the pilot. So it's a three-tier algorithm in which the C26 lyso-Pc is measured twice. First, the first time in a really rapid assay in a screening lab. But it's not that sensitive, so you have to do it again. In a much more sensitive method, but it takes a little bit more time. And then finally, you do ABCD1 sequencing. In the United States, when there is no mutation in the ALD gene, the screening continues until there is a diagnosis is set. Yeah, we had to do it different because we were only allowed to pick up boys with ALD. So we used the screening algorithm from New York State. But we placed the X counter, so counting the X chromosome as the second step. And we also had the same 2 other tiers. But if there's no variant in the ABCD1 gene, we also stop. So we only pick up boys with ALD. So this we developed in the lab, and then of course we had to test it. And because it's a pilot and a research study, to make it a little bit more complicated, so it's already complicated because there are 4 steps, but there are also many labs involved in this. So there was also a logistical challenge, getting all the samples in the right lab in the same good time frame. And as I said, it's and also we had to finish within 35 days, because in the Netherlands, when the heel prick is taking the baby, after 35 days, parents will receive notification with the result. If it's good, if it's not good, the child is of course already informed and referred. But everybody receives notification. And now again, because it's a research study, parents had to give informed consent. So we had to develop a brochure with information, because it's quite unique that you only screen boys. But of course we had to test this, so we also wanted to have parents of a daughter participating, otherwise we could not test this method. And then, as I said, the screening lasted for 1 year. So every baby that was born from January 1st until December 31st in 2021 in these 4 provinces could participate. We also built a website. So the study is finished, so I can show you the results of the study. And what is also nice is that after the study, we received permission, or requested and received permission, to evaluate anonymized data regarding gestational age, sex, birth weight, and the age of Hilprich, because there are questions out there with respect to the C20 ELISA PC, and we also could answer those questions, and I'll show you that later on the slide. So in total, 72,379 babies were born in these 4 provinces in 2021. 1,171 parents declined to participate in the study. Well, the 2/3 were girls and 1/3 were boys. And we do know in the Netherlands there's a very high participation rate for newborn screening, 99.2% in 2021. And if you look at the amount of boys that participated in the screening was also very close to the rate. So only 0.3% of parents, for whatever reason, decided not to get their baby screened for ALD. So in that case, if they refused to participate in the pilot, the babies were screened for all the other conditions. In total we screened 71,000 blood spots. And here you see the C20 ELISA PC concentrations, and the red line is the cutoff. And if we zoom in, we had 507 blood spots that were above the cutoff, and these went to the second tier, the X counter. And here we see the test, and we had close to 50-50 ratio between boys and girls. And only the ones with 1 X chromosome went to the third test. And these are the results of the C20 ELISA PC. So we tested before we started. We got anonymized random samples from newborns, which we used to set up a cutoff. We could retrieve a few blood spots from newborns from the Netherlands, of which we knew that that we could retrieve the blood spots, and we received blood spots from Joe Orsini from New York State to test the method and to set up the cutoffs. And this is the results of the live screening, so it really resembles at least the control level from what we did before. And this was the cutoff. So we had 20 blood spots that were above the cutoff, and these went to the 4th tier, ABCD1 sequencing. And the results are shown here. Out of the 20 boys that we sequenced for ABCD1, 16 had no variant in the ABCD1 gene. And in 4 cases, we found a likely pathogenic or a pathogenic variant. And this means the end of the newborn screening, because this is the last step. So the final part is that these children were referred to a pediatric neurologist. And because we have some time with ALD, we designed a method that is as patient, little boy, as family friendly as possible. So how we set it up in ALD is that with a positive screening result, the medical advisor of the newborn screening program contacts the pediatrician at the Amsterdam UMC. Well, in general, that's Mark Engelen, my colleague. And then already an appointment is scheduled. And then the medical advisor contacts the family physician. And the family physician is the person who contacts the family. And we will never do this on a Friday. I can tell you now, in the pilot, it was always on a Tuesday. And then within 24 hours, the family met with the pediatric neurologist at the AMC. So to limit that time of uncertainty, we also know that the families really like that, to have this very short. And we will continue to do that. So now the newborn screening part is over. Now the family is at the Amsterdam UMC. Of course, you need to know that you have the right baby in front of you. So little Hilprich is taken to confirm the diagnosis. And then several weeks later, the family again visits the AMC. I mentioned that the first symptom of ALD can be adrenal insufficiency. So already at that first visit, the adrenal function is tested. The family meets with the clinical geneticist to draw the family tree, to see if we can pick up other boys at risk. And they meet with the pediatric neurologist and answer all the questions. And then this continues every 6 months until the age of 12 years, and then every year. And of course, after the age of 2 years or 3 years, the baby receives his first MRI. Well, I told you that we have a logistical, interesting, lengthy procedure, and we have the 35 days cutoff. So we also evaluated the analytical run-through times, and we did very well. In general, we finished the whole procedure in 3 weeks, and maybe 1 week later. And I also said that we could answer questions that are out there. For example, what is the level of this biomarker during pregnancy? And since we had all the anonymous data and also gestational age, we could plot the C26 lyso-Pc levels against the gestational age, and also the time of at heel prick. And sometimes there was a repeat measurement, so this went on to weeks after birth. And we see that it's rather constant. There's a little wobble. Yeah. But if we look at, and we now have more samples, if we look at ALD boys, they're really above the line. So there's no reason for concern. So we don't have to adjust cutoffs depending on the age of the birth, or if really a preemie is born, you don't have to repeat the newborn screening at term age. And these are all really relevant data points. Conclusions. Male newborns can be identified by only using dry blood spots. The algorithm we developed is in compliance with the Health Council recommendation to only screen boys for ALD. Well, the covariates, the essential age, sex, birth weight, and the age of heel prick sampling does have a minimal effect on C26 lyso-Pc, but it does not require adjustments of the cutoff. And yeah, we identified 4 boys with ALD, and of course, yeah, for these boys, this allowed prospective monitoring and, when it's needed, timely therapeutic intervention. And also important, you want your screening to be as good as possible with as low number of false positives. And the positive predictive value for this algorithm is 100%. And what's really nice is that, so we spent 2022 in evaluating and writing reports. And by now 2 weeks ago, the State Secretary of Health decided to add ALD to the National Newborn Screening Program, and as of October 1st, ALD will be screened nationwide in the Netherlands. I can say this is the first country in the world, but Taiwan of course also, but then I would probably come into trouble with the Chinese. Yeah, so this is really exciting. There's even a copy there at the back from the letter to Parliament, because this really has to go to Parliament and everything. And yeah, so it's oh yeah, and then just a little reality check. I said that we started in 2013 when Mark and I nominated it. In 2015, there was this plan to expand the newborn screening program. In 2018, we started with the pilot, but 6 weeks later, we stopped with the pilot because there was a problem with the first tier. We had to notify 8,000 families that the boy was not screened for ALD. And then we spent 2020 for evaluating the first step, and we restarted in 2021. Well, I showed you the date of the pilot. 2022, we did paperwork and many meetings, and now 10 years later, so luckily within 10 years, it will start. Well, these are all the people have participated in this huge project, and if there are any questions. Oh yeah, so if you want to hear more, there is a podcast with James Nurse from the Journal of Inherited Metabolic Diseases about this whole topic.